Hi, hello, it's Ro. Culture strongly influences psychology. It's only something I'm really starting to scratch the surface on. It was provoked by joining this group of Asian mental health practitioners called Shapes and Sounds. They run workshops for the communities as well as practitioner training. It's really made me start to think about the impact of being an Asian psychologist in a Western country, and then also just my experience as an Asian woman brought up in Australia. I was brought up in an incredibly white neighborhood. I was one of only 2 Asian people in my entire grade, and the impact of that would have on me and my worldview and my beliefs and my education. There are just so many thoughts that I've been having with what are the dynamics of people being able to seek help and how that is influenced by culture. Really quick example, my friend went to their local GP, who was their family GP, asked for a mental health care plan, and they were like, I don't recommend it, and then started talking to them about their parents. How deeply culture can affect our ability to even go and start seeking help, because it took my friend so much courage to go and see that GP in the very first place. Not putting that GP under the bus, but also understanding where that GP comes from, where the community comes from. Then also understanding in a psychological perspective and a therapeutic perspective when it comes to this Western model of sitting in a chair 1 hour, talking about your feelings verbally, how that model of mental health care is so different. For example, in Asian culture or in Chinese culture, in my particular family, it's not very common to talk about your feelings. You don't really say it very much, but you feel it through action. The very first thing you might say when you go home is like, 食咗嘢未啊? Which is like, have you eaten yet? That dates back to a time when there was poverty and there wasn't food around, and so you'd ask that as a way of caring for people and being able to feed them. China just celebrates its food so much, such a food culture. There are just aspects to the way that we engage with other people, aspects of the way that we talk, the way that we present ourselves, our personalities. So much of that is influenced by culture, and I don't have like a list today or anything. It's just something I just wanted to kind of talk about it. I'd so love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to start a conversation on this. I'm so on the beginning of learning to be culturally responsive, but a couple of thoughts. Mental health is so cultural. What is considered right or wrong completely changes based on what country you're in. Many Indigenous cultures have spiritual guides and leaders who, through a Western frame of view, has schizophrenia or psychosis. They're revered and they're respected, and they provide a lot of solace and comfort to certain communities. On the flip side, you see it through a different cultural lens, and suddenly they need medication and they need to be put into hospital and they need to be kept out of society's way when they're unwell. Even just the experience of psychosis can be so different based on culture. In Japan, there's a practice of, not practice, but there's this thing called inamuri, which is when you're so exhausted and overwhelmed by work that you fall asleep at work. This is actually a sign that you're diligent and you're a hard worker, and it's expected that at any moment, if you're exhausted, that a boss can call on you and you can spring back into action. Whereas through a Western lens, something like that would be seen as complete and utter burnout, like that you can't even stay awake at work. And instead of the boss kind of going, oh, look at him, my most diligent worker, you're probably going to get referred to like an EAP psychologist or like put on forced leave or something. What is considered healthy, unhealthy, what is considered normal, atypical, disordered is very, very cultural, and cultural then feeds into, historical, social. There are so many different factors, but just a couple of things when it comes to being, well, I can only speak to being Chinese. I was brought up in an Anglo-Saxon white neighborhood, the Shire. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's next to the beaches. If anyone knows Sarah's Day, the fitness influencer, we grew up in the same area. And it was a lovely, welcoming, warm community, but the impact of what it's like to be like the only Asian person, when you look around, there are no Asian faces. Any of the teachers, any of my friends, any of my sports coaches, music teachers, apart from my own family. And obviously as a child, you're just like, okay, well, this is normal. But it's not until I'm older that I reflect on, I wonder how much of that fear of fitting in and even not liking my name. It's an unusual kind of name. I just wanted to be a Jessica, and I just wanted to have boring sandwiches, even though I didn't even really like the taste of Vegemite. And So much of my early childhood identity was I was incredibly socially anxious. I just never wanted anyone to look at me or stand out or be anything special, or I just didn't want people to notice I was even there. And I wonder how much of that was, I guess inherent sensitivity, and how much of that was my culture and the cultural sphere of where I was growing up. I think I've become aware that I do have some level of internalized racism, and that's when a member of a marginalized or a minority group ends up kind of buying into some of the stigma or kind of discriminatory behavior, and in a way it perpetuates that feeling of oppression. An example is I once dated this guy as kind of a white guy, and he once said to me, a couple dates in, he said, "Ro, I've never dated a Chinese girl before. I never wanted to, but you're different. You're like feisty, and you're fun and kind of loud sometimes." At the time, I actually felt flattered. I actually thought, yeah, I'm not like other Chinese people. And it's really embarrassing to say that now, because obviously that was such a stereotypical view of what Asian people are like. Actually, when I kind of walked away from the date, I was kind of like, what the heck, did he expect me to be flattered by that? My mum's an Asian woman, and she's one of the strongest women that I know. A lot of Asian families actually have a very matriarchal setup, and so the women might be a little bit more quiet and demure in public, but then at home, like, they pull the shots and they wear the pants. It's such a stereotype of Asian women, and it was almost thrown out as like a compliment, and it was kind of a racist compliment, and I accepted it as a compliment. So that was my own internalized racism. Yeah, I am kind of more white and I'm more outgoing, and having that proximity to whiteness was an achievement in some way, that I'd done the assimilation and I'd, become a proper Australian. So I want to get more aware of this internalized racism. Even little things of like, I love associating as an ABC, which is an Australian-born Chinese person, and there are some aspects of it which are lovely because you meet another ABC and you kind of feel like you have similar shared experiences. But the flip side of that is also, I'm not like Chinese-born Chinese. I'm Australian-born Chinese, I'm different, I'm not like them. And our acronym for those people are FOBs, which is like fresh off the boat, or people who probably were brought up in China and came later. In some ways, it's lovely, it's a community, and in some ways, I wonder how much of it is, again, proximity to whiteness and wanting to seem more white and going, oh, I'm actually Australian, but I just look Chinese. I'm a banana. There are all these labels. I'm only just starting to kind of unpick and reflect and pick out moments of my past where actually I fully was racist to myself and my community, and in some ways by saying I'm not like them, I've just gone and been racist and stereotyped and marginalized Asian culture. Another thing that it got me thinking about was this idea of there being so many types of Asian. There's the like Chinese or Japanese or Korean, but there's also Indian and Sri Lankan. I'm not even really across how huge that continent is, and all of the different cultures and languages and even religions, and we kind of just lump everyone into Asian or Southeast Asian, and then there's like brown Asian, and you just kind of lump it as you are the Asians and you guys are the model minority. You're good at maths, you're quiet, you're submissive, and then certain things around intersectionality. So intersectionality is when you bring in other factors. So being Asian, but then also being a woman or a young Asian woman. For instance, Asian women are fetishized, whereas Asian men are often ranked as being the least attractive and on the very bottom of the tier when it comes to Black men, white men, Latino men, and how we're just lumped in. Asian women are submissive and kinky or whatever, and then Asian men are subservient and not very attractive. And Hollywood is, well, actually Hollywood isn't doing anything, but certain actors and actresses in Hollywood and producers, Asian people, are trying to kind of create more representation, still at the really baby stages of this. And how does that impact our mental health? Like, there are so many aspects to how we see ourselves, how we see our place in the world, how we see how we should be, and a lot of people in my kind of generation, you were brought up with some Asian values, but you were also deeply rooted in a Western society. And so how do you meld that? There's going to be some level of tension between you and the other generation with any type of international move. And a lot of that has kind of been pushed onto like, Asian parents are terrible and they don't hear my feelings and they're hypercritical. But when we consider the other flip side of a generation that's probably not addressed older Chinese people and their mental well-being. You know, imagine being uprooted in your 20s, move to a completely new country where you don't know the language and the people there don't really like you, and then raising children. There are just so many nuances to this experience. Yeah, I feel like I've just had like how long was that? 15-minute rant. It's just something that I'm learning about. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Learning more about culture is going to be a goal that I have for myself and something that I want to do more of. And I hope I'll be able to share some of it on this channel when I do learn more. Thank you guys so much for watching and joining me every week. It means a lot. And I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this one. Yeah, I'll be seeing you next week. Okay, bye.